The morning was quiet in the hills outside of Elms Creek, a small town in Oregon where the air always carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Harold Mason, a seasoned lumberjack who had worked these woods for over 3 decades, set out with his saw, his truck, and a thermos of coffee. He had been hired to cut down several old maples that leaned dangerously close to a dirt road. It was routine work, the kind of task he had done so many times that he no longer thought twice about it. By late morning, Harold had already felled 3 trees. He paused to sharpen his chainsaw, then moved to the largest maple, one that towered over the others with a trunk thicker than the hood of his truck. Its bark was gray and scarred, and a hollow bulge near its base suggested rot inside. Harold knew it had to come down. He made his cut, the chainsaw roaring as it bit into the wood. The tree gave a long, groaning creak before tilting and crashing to the ground with a thunderous crack. Birds scattered into the sky, startled by the noise. When Harold walked closer to begin trimming branches, he noticed something odd. The trunk had split open where the hollow had been, revealing not just dark, rotted wood, but something pale tangled inside. At first he thought it was an animal skeleton, maybe a deer that had crawled into the hollow years ago. But as he looked closer, his blood ran cold. There were shoes, old leather shoes, cracked with age, and bones, human bones. The chainsaw slipped from Harold's hands. He staggered back, staring at the twisted remains pressed into the core of the maple. Inside the ribcage hung remnants of fabric, a scrap of faded blue cloth that looked like part of a jacket. A chain looped around the skeleton's torso, rusted but still intact, biting into the bark that had grown around it. The tree had swallowed the body whole, entombing it for decades. Harold knew instantly this was no accident. He reached for his phone and dialed 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had just found. Police cars and forensic vans soon lined the dirt road. Yellow tape cordoned off the area as investigators carefully extracted the remains from the tree. The bones were brittle, the skull cracked in places where the pressure of the tree's growth had warped it. Yet there were enough clues to suggest a story. The chain, the clothing, the shoes, and inside a decayed pocket, a thin plastic card with faded lettering. Elms Creek Public Library. The name on it, barely legible, read Marianne Caldwel. Detectives exchanged glances. The name was familiar. Back in 1981, Marianne had been reported missing. She was 24 years old, a quiet, studious young woman who worked at the local library. She had been planning to move to Portland to pursue a degree in literature. One evening, she closed up the library and was never seen again. Her car was discovered abandoned on a forest road just a mile from where Harold felled the maple. Despite weeks of searching, no trace of her was ever found. The case eventually went cold, gathering dust in the archives of the county sheriff's office. The rediscovery of her remains reawakened memories in Elms Creek. Residents who had lived there during the 1980s remembered the shock of her disappearance. The town had been small then, only a few thousand people, and Marianne was well-liked. For months after she vanished, parents kept their children indoors, and rumors swirled. Some said she had run away. Others whispered about a drifter who had been seen in town. But one name had come up more often than others: John Raines, the local mechanic. Raines had been in his 30s at the time, a rough man with oil-stained hands and a temper that flared easily. He had reportedly taken an interest in Marianne, showing up at the library more often than most men in town. Some remembered how he lingered near her desk, trying to make small talk, how she politely but firmly turned down his invitations. On the night she disappeared, Raines had been seen near the library. But when questioned, he claimed he had spent the evening in his garage fixing a customer's car. A neighbor vouched for him, and with no body, no evidence, the police let him go. The suspicion lingered, but without proof, the case was left unresolved. Now, decades later, the body inside the maple brought everything back. Investigators began a new inquiry. They sent fragments of the chain for analysis, scraped for DNA, and examined the bones for signs of trauma. Forensic experts discovered that Marianne's femur bore a sharp fracture, consistent with a violent blow. Her skull, too, had a hairline crack. These were not injuries caused by time or by the pressure of the tree. They were inflicted before she was hidden inside. Someone had killed her. Detectives revisited the old case files. The witness statements, the police reports, the names of those questioned. John Raines stood out immediately. By now he was 75 years old, living in a nursing home 2 towns over. His health was failing, but he was still lucid. Detectives obtained a warrant and visited him. Sitting across from them, his hands trembling, he listened as they laid out what they had found. At first, he denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Marianne, that he had only spoken to her a few times. But when detectives confronted him with new evidence, his expression changed. The DNA tests had revealed traces of his genetic material on the rusted chain. It wasn't much, just enough skin cells, trapped and preserved by the metal, but it was sufficient. It placed him with the body. It placed him at the scene. Raines's shoulders slumped. After a long silence, he began to speak. His words came slowly, haltingly, like someone carrying a burden for far too long. He admitted that on the night of October 12, 1981, he had gone to see Marianne after she closed the library. He wanted to persuade her, one last time, to give him a chance. When she refused, anger overtook him. He grabbed her arm. She tried to break free, and in the struggle he struck her with a wrench he had been carrying from his garage. She collapsed. He panicked. Instead of calling for help, he dragged her body into the woods. He had stumbled upon a hollow maple, its trunk split open near the base. It was large enough to fit her inside. He stuffed her body into the cavity, wrapped a chain around her to keep her in place, and left her there. Over the years, the tree grew around the corpse, sealing it away from sight, as if nature itself had conspired to hide the crime. "I thought it would never be found," Raines muttered, his voice barely audible. "I thought the forest would keep my secret." The confession was chilling, but it did not bring closure the way some expected. Raines was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. However, his health deteriorated rapidly. Within weeks, he was transferred from jail to a hospital, where he died of heart failure before the case could go to trial. There would be no jury, no verdict, no formal sentencing. Just his words and the body in the tree. For the Caldwel family, who had long since left Elms Creek, the discovery was bittersweet. After 42 years, they finally knew what had happened to Marianne. Her remains were released to them, and she was buried beside her parents in a cemetery outside Portland. At the funeral, her younger brother, now gray-haired himself, said quietly, "At least she's no longer lost. At least we can say goodbye." But the grief was sharpened by anger. Justice had slipped away again, stolen by time and mortality. In Elms Creek, the story spread quickly. Neighbors who remembered Marianne as the smiling young woman behind the library desk shook their heads in disbelief. For weeks, townsfolk drove past the site where the tree had been felled, staring at the empty patch of earth. Some said they would never look at the forest the same way again. The woods had always been a place of work, of hunting, of Sunday walks. Now they seemed haunted, heavy with secrets. The case of Marianne Caldwel became a cautionary tale, retold in whispers and local newspapers. The image of a tree growing around a body, keeping it hidden for decades, was something people could not forget. It was as if the forest itself had become an accomplice, guarding the truth until it decided the time was right to let it out. A secret kept in wood and roots, revealed only when an old lumberjack saw happened to cut the right trunk on the right day. Harold Mason, the man who had first spotted the bones, rarely spoke of what he saw. Friends said he became quieter after that day, that he walked differently through the woods, as though listening for something beneath the rustle of leaves. Sometimes he wondered how many other trees carried secrets, how many other trunks might hold what people thought was gone forever. He never cut another tree without glancing at the heartwood, half expecting it to reveal another face, another ghost from the past. The town of Elms Creek moved on, as towns always do. The library where Marion once worked was still standing, though its paint had peeled and its roof sagged. The new librarian, too young to remember the events of 1981, kept a small framed photograph of her predecessor on a back shelf, a quiet tribute to the woman whose story had lingered like a shadow for more than 40 years. And in the quiet of the Oregon woods, where trees grow tall and time moves slowly, the memory of the body in the tree became part of the landscape, a reminder that even the strongest walls of silence, bark, wood, decades of growth, cannot keep the truth hidden forever.